Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today I'm doing some Satellarknight test hands. So I'm really excited to see you guys because this is actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Jin. And this deck is an amazing deck that came out of the Duelist Alliance era of Yu-Gi-Oh, which is my favorite era. This deck is a really amazing rank 4 base deck that can go into some really crazy monsters like our Satellarknight Trevere, which can bounce every single card on the field back to both players' hands except itself, which is a crazy powerful effect. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can come part of our notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards like getting your name skipped every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your Patreon, along with test hands. And definitely give Jen some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such an awesome deck. So let's get straight on into this one, guys. This deck is a really amazing deck that basically makes all sorts of different rank 4 monsters, and it's just a really fun deck overall to play because you just set a bunch of traps on your side of the field, summon out maybe an XZ monster to your side of the field or one of our other boss monsters that we play, and it's just overall a fantastic deck that came out of Duelist Alliance. It's super fun to be able to play, and I really love this deck. If you guys would like to check out the deck profile, as always, it is down in the description down below if you guys would like to check that out. But you guys know is dead rule number 1. We've got to pile shuffle the deck because if you don't, you might brick, and you don't want to brick. So let's go ahead and see what we can do after we shuffle up the deck. We're going to give the deck a quick cut and see what we can pull off with our first test hand, because as you guys know, this deck is super consistent, but it's just a really fun deck to play. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. We're drawn to a copy of Altair, a copy of Crackdown, that's pretty good, Monster Reborn, a copy of Torrential Tribute, and any Tellarknight would do, a copy of Artifact Scythe. You can still play with a really good hand like this because you can Scythe lock your opponent, which is really good with the copy of our Artifact Sanctum. So you have some really simple plays in this hand by just setting these 3 cards to your side of the field, and then you can, if you'd like to, normal summon out that copy of Altair, or you can hold it if you want to for other plays later on, depending on what we hit for the following turn. We can go ahead and pass over to the opponent and use the effect of our Artifact Sanctum to be able to special summon out Artifact Scythe to our side of the field, which is already an extremely powerful play to be able to lock down the opponent from their extra deck. I really like that effect to be able to do, to basically just lock them down so they can't do anything. It's just really nice. You also have the effect of the Torrential Tribute to board wipe the field, which helps out a lot if you do need to. If your opponent summons a monster that can get over the Scythe, you can board wipe the field, but if they don't, you can just leave that card face down. And if they do normal summon something to your field or summon their field, you can use the copy of Crackdown to take the monster, and then it gets summoned to your field because you get to take control of the monster, which is really nice with the copy of Crackdown to basically make it so that their normal summon is going to go to you instead of them, which I really like in this deck. Plus you can bounce this with Traverse so you can go and use it again, which is just really helpful. So once the opponent passes back over to us, we can go ahead and draw for turn, which is a copy of Deneb. That's already really good because then we can just normal summon the Deneb to our side of the field, use its effect to be able to search the deck for any Tellarknight monster that we need, like a copy of Vega, because then we can go into another monster next turn. We're then going to shuffle up the deck, which is going to help us out a lot to be able to just shuffle up the deck and then go in for the next turn, because now you can go ahead and link summon these 2 monsters together for a copy of our Anaconda, which is going to help us out a lot to go in for Anaconda, especially setting up the copy of Deneb in the graveyard so you can bring it back with Altair later is just really helpful. We can then pay the 2,000 life points for the copy of Anaconda, and then go ahead and send a copy of Fusion Destiny, Celestial, and a copy of our Dasher to the graveyard so we can go in for Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, which is just a really powerful play in this deck to be able to go into. I really like to be able to summon out Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer in this deck, especially since it can pop a card every single turn, which is just really helpful for us. You can then attack the opponent if you need to with this card, or pop a card on the field, depending on what you need. This card's got you, which is why I really like this card in this deck, and it helps you out a lot because it can get itself out of the way for when you summon out your copy of Trevere to be able to bounce all cards, and then the following turn you can just put it back on the field from the graveyard, which is really nice. And the copy of Dasher helps out because if we do top deck a Tellarknight monster, we can just special summon it to our side of the field once because they're all level 4s in this deck, which works with Dasher's ability during the draw phase. So it helps out a lot to be able to do that. You can also use the effect of the Crackdown to take an opponent's monster, and then once it's outlived its usefulness, you can basically just use the Crackdown with the Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer to be able to pop it on your side of the field if you want to use that instead, basically like a Scrap Dragon effect, which is pretty good. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the rest of this test time. We're going to pass over to the opponent. they're going to go ahead and go, and then you can basically use the copy of Torrential Tribute and be able to get the copy of Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer out of the way, destroying the copy of the Anaconda 2. But the copy of Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer can pop like a back row if you need to get that out of the way, while also board wiping the field is just really, really helpful. So then during your next standby phase, we're going to go ahead and draw, and then bring back the copy of our Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer to our side of the field, which is just really, really nice to be able to summon that monster. Now, I will say there's something really important about the Trevera that you got to keep in mind as you're playing this deck. This card actually does have a really interesting effect that it will lock you into being able to summon Tellarknights for the turn. Because during the turn you XZ summon this card, you cannot special summon monsters except for Tellarknight monsters, which is very important to keep in mind about the Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, but that's totally fine because we have plenty of other cards that we can summon from the extra deck besides the copy of Trevera while we're using the Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, which is really, really nice. So we're going to go ahead and normal summon out the copy of Vega, and then special summon out the copy of the Altair off the copy of Vega, which is then going to bring back to our side of the field the copy of Deneb, which is then going to give us an additional search of another Tellarknight monster, which is going to be our copy of our Altair to set us up all over again for more plays, which is really, really helpful for this deck. You can also use the effect of the Monster Reborn that we have in our hand to be able to bring back that copy of Celestial to our side of the field, or any of the other monsters that we have. I usually like to bring back the copy of the Celestial so we can go in for another rank 4 play. So you can go ahead and go in for the copy of a Deltaros or something like that. It's totally up to you. I'm just going to go ahead and overlay both of these down here into the Dark Tellarknight, which is going to help us out a lot to go into for that Dark Tellarknight, because then we can detach a material from it, discard a card from our hand, which can be the copy of Skybridge, to then make a copy of Deltaros on top of our copy of our Dark Tellarknight, which is just really, really nice to go in for that copy of our Deltaros. Helps out a lot to be able to go in for that card, and it's just an overall fantastic play. We can then send that card to the graveyard by using the effects of our Vega and our Celestial. We can just basically link summon with these two to summon out a copy of our Dagda to our side of the field. You can go ahead and use the effect of the Deltaros to detach the material to be able to pop a card on the field, which then your copy of your Dagda will go off, being able to set an additional copy of Scythe from the deck to our side of the field, which is going to help us out with that Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer to yet again lock our opponent out of the extra deck for the next turn, which is really, really good. We can then pass over to the opponent. When we pass over to the opponent, you can use Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, pop the copy of the Artifact Scythe, to be able to then special summon it to your side of the field and pop a card on your opponent's side of the field, which is really, really nice. Lock them out of that extra deck, which is just amazing with the copy of Scythe and Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. Helps out a lot to be able to use it with this. I really, really like that effect. To be able to destroy a card that you control and opponents controls, just really, really good to be able to use with Scythe. And then you have this really good field that basically just locks your opponent down, and you have the copy of Crackdown to get their normal summon away from them, which is really nice. If we go into the next turn, we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Alpha or Nova Alpha, which you can set on your side of the field and normal summon the Altair to bring back to our side of the field the copy of our Deneb again to the field, so we can go ahead and search the deck again for another card, like a copy of our Altair all over again, which is helpful to be able to get from our deck to our hand. I really, really like that ability to be able to just get that card. You don't have to use the Crackdown if you don't need to. It's basically just there if you need it. We can then go ahead and overlay both of these on our side of the field to make a copy of Abyss Dweller to lock our opponent down, or Utopia Double to be able to OTK the opponent, which is really good if they leave a monster on the field that has 2,000 or less attack points, which is why sometimes you actually don't need to use the Crackdown, because you have a card like your Altair on your side of the field. It does have a really good effect to be able to just use that, but you won't be able to attack for the rest of the turn with anything but your Tellarknight monsters, so you can just make a copy of the Dark Tellarknight and swing with this and the copy of Deltaros, which is really good. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next test hand. That's the only downside to Altair, is it does have the effect that monsters you control can't attack for the rest of the turn, except Tellarknight monsters, which is not that big of a deal in this deck, because you're just basically trying to lock your opponent down and summon out cards like Deltaros. It does make for a little bit of a slower game, but that's okay, because we can control the board with cards like Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, Artifact Scythe, and stuff like that to be able to just lock the opponent down. So keep that in mind as you play the deck, that Altair will lock you into being able to only attack with monsters monsters that are Tellarknight monsters. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do for the next test hand. As you guys can see, deck is super consistent. It's really all about that grind game with this deck because it can go in for some really, really good plays and it can go in for some crazy powerful effects. So we're going to go ahead and give the deck a quick cut and see what we can pull off for the next hand. We're going to go and draw a copy of our Nova Alpha, Monster Reborn, again, Vega, a copy of Torrential Tribute, and a copy of Fusion Destiny. Right off the bat, we've got the Fusion Destiny, which is not that bad. We can go ahead and normal summon out the copy of our Vega, so we can have that copy of Alpha, or Nova Alpha live, which is really good. And we can then go ahead and activate the effect of our Fusion Destiny. The only downside with this is we don't have another Tellarknight monster that we can use with our copy of Vega, but it's okay because we have the counter trap that's going to be able to go ahead and negate something, which is really, really helpful. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and destroy our Phoenix Enforcer again by sending our copy of Celestial and Dasher to the graveyard, which is going to be helpful because we don't have to go in for Anaconda to be able to summon it by hard drawing the Fusion Destiny, summon out the copy of our Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, set 2 on our side of the field, and then pass over to the opponent, which is not that big of a deal for this setup because you do have all those other cards. When their opponent goes, you can use the copy of Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer to be able to pop a card on their side of the field, and then pop the Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, and you have the negate of the Nova, or the Alpha, or Nova Alpha, which is really good to be able to just basically get rid of this on your side of the field, because it makes you send the Tellarknight you control to the graveyard to be able to activate it, but you do get to draw a card, which is pretty handy off this card's effect. So it stops your opponent, 1-for-1s them, and then you get to draw a card, which replaces the copy of the Vega that we had to tribute. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Crackdown, which is totally fine because we have Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer coming right back to the field. And you have the Torrential Tribute that if your opponent tries to do anything else, you can go ahead and drop the Torrential Tribute to board wipe the field, which is super helpful just to be able to board wipe the field. So pretty much you had a pop, you had a negate and draw one, and you had the Torrential, which is a board wipe. So you had some pretty good responses to the opponent. But at this point, we're going to go ahead and draw. Hopefully, it's a good Tellarknight monster, but we're going to draw into a copy of Sanctum, which is fine because now we can lock the opponent out of the extra deck, which we already board wiped them, so they're going to have to be recovering anyways. Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer will come back to the field. We can then set 2 on our side of the field, which is going to be a little helpful to set those cards to our side of the field. You can go ahead and use the Monster Reborn if you want to, or you can set it to your side of the field. To use Celestial's effect that has the ability that you can banish this card and a Destiny Hero monster from the graveyard to draw 2 cards, which is really helpful, but you can't have any cards in your hand, which is kind of important with this card, but we don't have anything because we've set everything, which is why it's so good to use Celestial in this deck. So we're going to go ahead and banish these 2 from the graveyard, and then once we do, we're going to be able to draw 2 cards, which is really, really helpful, because if you guys didn't know, with Celestial, that is a super powerful effect that reads as follows, that basically, while you have no cards in your hand, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card and one other Destiny Hero monster in the grave to draw 2 cards, which is why it's so powerful in this deck to be able to just banish and then draw these 2 cards, which is a double or nothing, but the Oasis of Dragon Soul is going to help us out a lot. That's the only reason I don't like to play double or nothing in this deck sometimes, is because it does lock you in, where you do sometimes hard draw into it, and it's not crazy good when you draw into it, but we still have all this back row against the opponent, which that Monster Reborn can bring back the copy of Vega, the Crackdown can basically take an opponent's monster, Oasis of Dragon Souls can bring back something from the graveyard, and then Sanctum is going to special summon Scythe from the deck during their turn, which is going to help us out a lot because it's going to lock our opponent down out of the extra deck. I really, really like that setup. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next one, guys, because that pretty much shows what the deck does for the first turn. Usually you're trying to get into Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer to be able to just set up your plays with your copy of your Artifact Scythe or Sanctum to be able to lock the opponent out of the extra deck, and then backing it up with all of your crazy powerful Tellarknight monsters, which is really, really nice. But let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do for the next play, because this deck is very, very consistent in what it's trying to do. Sometimes you will summon Trevere in the grind game, which is why you haven't seen me summon it very much in the beginning, because you don't want to summon it first turn because there won't be anything on the field that you really want to bounce. If you go second, it's really good to be able to summon because you can bounce all your opponent's cards back to the hand, but going first, you really want to just set a bunch of cards, summon out Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, and go from there, because it's really, really, really helpful to be able to go in for those plays. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next one. We're going to draw into a copy of Fiendish Chain, a copy of Vega, another copy of Fiendish Chain. We already have 2 negates. Fusion Destiny again, and a copy of our Sky Bridge. We're going to go ahead and use it again. We're going to use the Fusion Destiny. We have a double negate in our hand, which is really, really good to be able to establish. Go ahead and send from the deck to the grave that copy of the Celestial and the copy of Dasher to the graveyard. Summon out Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, set 2 to your side of the field, which is going to help us out a lot to be able to just set those 2 to our side of the field. And then you can pass over to the opponent, keeping the copy of Vega in hand, just in case you draw into a Satellarknight next turn and you can make another monster. Keep the copy of the Sky Bridge in the hand as well, which is going to help us out a lot, but you can have the copies of Fiendish Chain to be negates, which is really, really good of your opponent's monsters effects on the field, which is nice for this deck. And then if we can summon Trevere, you can actually bounce all the cards back to the hand, which is really, really good for this deck. So when our opponent passes back over to us, we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Oasis of Dragon Soul, which we can just normal summon out the copy of the Vega now. If we didn't pop, well, even if we did pop, you can use the effect to be able to pop a card on the field and then bring this back during the standby phase. But now normal summon the copy of Vega to our side of the field. And you do have the copy of the Sky Bridge in the hand. Let you target a Satellarknight monster you control, and then you can special summon a Satellarknight monster with a different name from your deck. And if you do, shuffle the targeted monster into the deck. And then while the monster is special summoned by this effect face on the field, you can't special summon monsters except Satellarknight monsters, which is going to turn off our Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer for a little bit, but that's totally fine because you can just destroy the monster and then use Oasis, which is what I'm actually going to do. I'm going to set the Oasis, activate the copy of the Sky Bridge to be able to target this card, the Vega, on my field, to be able to special summon a copy of Deneb to my side of the field, and then we're going to search the deck for a copy of Altair, which is going to be really, really helpful once it resolves, which is going to be pretty important to be able to shuffle this card back into the deck, grab the copy of Altair, and add it to our hand, which is going to help us out a lot to be able to just get that monster in our hand off the copy of Deneb once the Sky Bridge resolves, which is going to be really, really helpful. Now at this point, we can go ahead and let our opponent go, and this card can get popped by Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer to pop another card on our opponent's side of the field. But you also had the effect of the Oasis that can bring it back to our side of the field to search the deck for an additional card, which is going to help us out a lot to be able to grab that copy of Vega from our deck to our hand, which is super helpful, especially with those double Fiendish Chains on the field, because we can make an Altair, or not Altair, but Trevere on our side of the field to go in for some really insane plays. But now our opponent will pass back over to us. We'll go ahead and draw into an Artifact Sanctum, and then we can normal summon out the copy of Vega, which will then special summon out the copy of Altair. If your opponent does destroy this card, you can just bring it back to the field with the copy of Altair, which is really good. It will lock us into attacking only with Satellarknight monsters, but that's totally fine. Set this card to our side of the field. If we did get to summon this card, you would search another Altair. If you didn't, and it was just left on the field, we wouldn't get a search. But we can go ahead and overlay all of these cards way down here. But before we do, actually, go ahead and use the effect of the Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer to get it out of the way. And then once we do, we're going to go ahead and use the effect of in the graveyard, our copy of our Celestial to be able to banish these from the graveyard, to be able to draw 2 more cards, which is why I set the copy of Sanctum, to be able to draw 2 more cards from the deck, which is another copy of Vega and a Solemn Judgment, which is going to give us a +2, which is really nice. And then overlay all of these on your side of the field for the copy of Trevere to bounce everything back to the hand, which is really, really good to be able to bounce all those cards back to the hand. Once we do summon out that copy of the Trevere, everything bounces, which is going to put all these cards back into our hand and all the cards on our opponent's side of the field back into their hand. We are locked into summoning our only summoning out copies of Satellarknight monsters and attacking with Satellarknight monsters, but that's totally fine because you pretty much just use the Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer to be able to pop cards anyways. But the copy of Trevere also has a really good effect that you can detach a material from this card to be able to rip a card out of the opponent's hand. So basically, when you put all those cards back in your opponent's hand, it will be able to rip one out, which is nice. And then you basically just set 5 back on your side of the field, which we're just going to say this is our hand right over here. We're going to set all these back face down, and once we set all these back face down, we're going to hope that our opponent doesn't have a Harpy's Feather Duster now, and we're going to go ahead and let them go. And when they go, we do get the copy of Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer back on our field, which is really, really good that now you have both of these on the field, and you have the copy of Artifact Sanctum to be able to activate to summon out Scythe to lock them down from the extra deck for the rest of the turn, which is really, really good to be able to do because now you've locked them out of the extra deck, and you have a double negate with the double Fiendish Chain, set a copy of Judgment to negate, and you have a copy of Oasis of Dragon Souls, they can bring back the copy of Deneb and then use the copy of Deneb to be able to search the deck for an Altair, which is going to help us out a lot for the next turn because you can pop a card with your copy of Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer during the following turn to get it out of the way, summon 3, summon Deltaros, and then pop a card on the field, which is really good, and then go in with your Tellarknight monsters for some attacks, which is going to help us out a lot. So let's go ahead and do one more, guys, and see what we can pull off for the last test hand, because you guys can see deck is super consistent, super amazing at what it can pull off, because basically you're just going to summon out all sorts of Tellarknight monsters to your side of the field with Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer because it's such a powerful boss monster. I really like Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer in this build a lot more because it can get itself out of the way for Trevere, whereas Dragoons can't, which is the only downside to playing Dragoon in this deck compared to that card. But let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do for the next one. So we're going to go ahead and see what we can do for the last test hand, which is going to be a copy of Nova Alpha, Fusion Destiny, again, a copy of Altair, this deck really wants me to have that, and another copy of Altair. Pretty much at this point, you're just going to activate the Fusion Destiny. I don't know how I've drawn this every single hand just about, but we're going to go ahead and use the Fusion Destiny to be able to use with the copy of our Celestial and our Dasher, which we're just going to go ahead and use these right here. And then once we do, we're going to go ahead and send these to the graveyard. And then we're going to normal summon out our copy of our Altair after we summon out the copy of Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, or do it beforehand, before you activate the Fusion Destiny, just to get it on the field. Because basically you're just trying to normal summon that monster to your field. And your copy of Fusion Destiny has the ability, after this card resolves, you can't special summon monsters except for Dark Hero monsters, but you can still normal summon out the copy of the Altair, which is totally fine. So we're going to go ahead and set our 1 negate, pass over to the opponent, which is sometimes all you really need in this deck. We're then going to pass over to the opponent. You can use the Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer to pop a card, and you have the negate set with the copy of Nova Alpha, which will send this to the graveyard, but it will give us a draw off of whatever we hit, which is a copy of Rhoda, which is really good. That's actually really, really good. We're going to go ahead and pass back over to us, draw for turn, which is a copy of a Nuclei. We're going to special summon out the copy of Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, then use the copy of Rhoda to be able to grab from the deck a copy of our... I think I want to grab Vega this time. Let's grab Vega, because we can use the Vega to be able to special summon. Do you lock me? Can I grab Altair? Oh, yeah, no, I can't grab Altair. I thought I couldn't, but I wanted to make sure with the copy of that card. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck, and this is going to be the first time we summon a Nuclei, because we're going to summon out the Vega, then summon the Nuclei. A Nuclei is going to go off, and then we're going to send a copy of Deneb to the graveyard for its effect, because it does Foolish Burial on summon. We can then use both of these monsters on our side of the field to be able to Xyz summon into a copy of our Dark Tellarknight, detach a material off of this card, and then summon out a copy of Deltaros, which we are going to discard the copy of the Fusion Destiny for the effect of our Dark Tellarknight. We can then pop 2 cards on the field, which is going to be really helpful, and we've got the Altair set up in our hand. The next turn we can just normal summon it, bring back the copy of the Neb, get an additional search from deck, and then keep going and grinding through this deck, which is really good. Which is just a really good hand. I really like that. It's really helpful. Since we didn't lock ourselves in with the Tellarknights, we can still attack like this, which is fine. And if we get that copy of the Altair out of the hand, we can banish these 2 from the deck to be our graveyard to be able to then get an additional draw too, which is really helpful. Because the next turn we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Judgment, set this card face down, normal summon out the copy of Altair, use its effect to be able to then grab from the graveyard. I do want that draw too, so I'm going to summon out the copy of our Deneb to our side of the field, or actually I'll summon out the copy of Vega instead, because we do, actually, yeah, we'll summon out the copy of the Vega to our side of the field, because I don't really need the search, I want the draw too. We can then go ahead and use the effect of our 2 monsters in the graveyard. Since we don't have anything in the hand, we're then going to use the copy of Dasher and our copy of Celestial to then draw an additional 2 cards from the deck, which is 2 more negate, or a negate and a copy of a board wipe, which is really good. Overlay both of these on the field, and we can lock the graveyard down if we want to with a copy of Abyss Dweller. And throughout the live duel, or throughout the test hands, you can summon out Constellar Diamond as well to be able to basically negate Dark Monsters effects if you want to on top of your Satellarknights, which is really, really good. So I think that pretty much shows you guys how the deck works. It's really, really fun to be able to do. It's really crazy all the plays that you can pull off in this deck, especially with Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer being introduced into this deck, because you can basically just get it out of the way for Trevere, which is really nice. And I will say the reason you guys didn't see Trevere come out all that much in this is because he he's more of a grind card. As you go into turn 3 or 4 in this game, you're going to summon out that card to be able to bounce all the cards back to the hand, which is why I wanted to show you guys that in one of the test hands. But it's still really important to summon that card to your side of the field so you get those crazy plays to be able to just bounce all the cards on the field back to the hand. So that's pretty much it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can become part of the notification squad. Definitely tell what you think of this deck down in the comments down below, and give Jin some love down in the comments for suggesting such an awesome deck. We'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.